Talk show. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, across the nation or around the world. Once again, you were listening to the VMware Community's Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 558. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today I have my regular co-host, Matt Lungus. Today is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. Matt, how you doing today?
Eric, I think it's another day with technology somewhat issues. I think my DSLR of 5 or 6 years and EOS Revel T4i finally kicked the bucket, and we're back over to all things Logitech with a standard webcam for today. But all in all, not too bad. Can't complain. Weather is hot and muggy this week here in central Pennsylvania. Should clear out through the weekend, and we're going to see a high of 84, 85 on both Saturday and Sunday. So really looking forward to another great upcoming weekend. But how are things out on the West Coast, sir? How are you? And most importantly, what is the color of the bay?
We've had some strange weather today, guys. I'll tell you this. Yesterday was nice, 78 degrees, warm, a little bit, getting a little summertime happening. This morning we woke up and it was like 43 degrees, windy, cold, choppy. The color of the bay is dark green and choppy. We got just a little windstorm. I've heard that's happened up in the in Chicago area and in the Plains area where you just got some like really cold weather, just in the June, right? Like we got a little of that in California today, but it blew through and now it's kind of sunny and warmer today. On the show today, we got a fun show today. We've got our favorite people in the world, VMware User Group leadership here, Brad Tompkins, Executive Director, and Steve Athanas, VMware VMUG President. We got them on the show. We're going to get to talk about things opening back up. I know they're in their offices. So Brad and Steve, welcome to the show. We'll get to you in a second, but hey, how you guys doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us here. It's wonderful to be on a podcast that I've spent so many hours listening to over the years.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be here. And 67 degrees here in Franklin, Tennessee.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, there you go. It's a little bit chilly, but that's not too bad. It looks like nice. If you want to go check us out, want to see what Brad or Steve looks like, we do publish live on TalkShoe. Just go to youtube.com/vbarbecue, and you can just check us out and see what we look like and give us a like and a follow if you want to. No worries if you don't. So before we get to VMUG, all things VMUG, I'm excited about what's going to be happening as we come out of COVID. I know they're working in the office now, so that's good for them, and we'll get to hear what they're up to and when things are going to go live back for VMUG meetings. But before we do that, we'll just mention some key dates. VMworld registration is going to open up on the 15th of this month, June 15th. You can go in and register. It's going to be online again this year. So we've got some cool stuff for community going to be happening. We're going to have live streams. It's not going to be recorded. The community booth is going to be open. The code booth is going to be open, all online. You can drop in at any time, and we'll have a session schedule for V Brown Bag as well as the VMware Code folks. And so that should be fun this year versus last year we didn't really have any live place to chat and meet people and see faces and engage. This year we're definitely doing that. So get ready to register June 15th, and then I don't know the dates for Schedule Builder are open yet, but come back, we'll let you know when that is. Matt, I know vExperts has got some date. Why don't you take us through that, and then we'll get into the topic.
So vExpert applications, we've been mentioning this, but we're now just right around the corner. So Monday, June 7th, we will have the second half of 21 applications open up for vExpert. And we're anticipating probably the first week of July, I believe. We'll check back with Corey on that date, but about a month from there, we'll have the application announcements. So if you're looking at vExpert or have sat idle and let your application lapse for whatever reason, reach out to your local vExpert Pro. They'll be there to help you with the application, and be ready to hit that apply button on June the 7th.
All right. Sweet. Last thing we'll talk about events before we get to Brad and Steve is, we're going to be talking about coming back to live events, in-person events, as we've all been vaccinated up here. And one shout out is AWS reInvent in December. We're thinking about going, and it'll be in Vegas. It'll be our kind of first live event. So, if you're sad about not getting to meet all of us and do some walking around a venue you and seeing real physical people. We are thinking about being at AWS reInvent in Vegas into the early December. So stay tuned there, and hopefully we'll get a small booth, a VMware code booth, and we'll be there. And I know that VMware does announcements there, so we'll probably have some VMware presence as well in the main area. But looking forward to engaging and bringing some of the key people along. So if you're really desperate, want to meet some people, you can go to VMUGs and you can start. We'll hear about that. And then if you want to do a big event, we are planning to be at AWS reInvent in December. And with that, we'll jump into the show. So Brad Tompkins has been on the show many times, so we'll introduce you first. Brad, give us a 1 minute or 2 minute elevator pitch. Who are you and how long have you been in the VMware ecosystem and doing stuff at VMUG?
All right. Well, my name's Brad Tompkins. I'm the executive director of VMUG. I've been in IT my whole 25 plus career. Joined VMUG, I think it was early 2000s, became the executive director in 2015. And it's just fantastic to represent such an awesome community. And I'm always blown away by what this community does. And it's majority driven by volunteers, which is fantastic to see the passion. And one of those volunteers, the key volunteer, if you will, is Steve Athanas. And so, Steve, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself on that. Sorry, Eric, if I'm stealing some of your thunder there. But this community is all about volunteers, and the amount of work the volunteers gets done is amazing. So, Steve, you're one of those. So I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Brad. Hi, I'm Steve Athanas. I am a volunteer VMware user. I have been in this industry my entire life, and I don't even just say my adult life. I was that kid that my parents would loan out to their friends to have their friends' computers fixed. So in that way, I don't think I was compensated for that. It's probably a moral quandary for another day. But I've been doing IT my whole life and got into VMUG in, like Brad, in the early, probably late 20-aughts, right? 2008-ish. I'm just going to pin a date there. Was doing that for a while, became a VMUG leader, onto the board of directors, and then I've been president since 2019. So I'm not saying that there's a correlation between who sits as VMUG president and worldwide pandemics, but I'm not saying there isn't right now. So that's been my gig. So by day, my professional job, I'm the Associate Chief Information Officer at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, where I oversee IT infrastructure from data center to client services and kind of everything in between.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. This is so in a sense of your 2019 and when you joined and now been through the pandemic, I know we've all danced a lot to try to figure out what our job role can be through the pandemic. And I know that VMUG has spent a lot of time being online, right, and engaging with people. Why don't you explain to us, like, where have you been the last year? And then we'll get into where you're hoping to go as you move forward and start to connect people. But really, VMUG has been there all along, and I always smile because when I talk to people, because I'm dealing with vExperts and people that are building labs and all that, VMUG for a lot of people are where I go buy my Advantage program so I can get my license. I get my license keys there, right? If you don't make the vExpert cut, you can go over to Advantage and get a lot of value from that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where VMUG has been the last year and kind of some of the value props of what's happening. Then we'll get into how things are going to open back up for you guys.
Sure. Brad, you want to go? You want me to go?
Knock it out, Steve.
So look, VMUG has been, you asked where VMUG has been over the past year, and the answer is literally wherever you are, right? We've been in your living room or your office or wherever you are. And we're really proud of how we've been able to just continue to deliver connections and content to people wherever they are virtually. And I think the differentiator for VMUG and why we were so comfortable doing this is that our virtual programs weren't new. We didn't have to spin that up and invent that when the pandemic started. We've been doing worldwide virtual programs for years. And so it was simply a matter of scaling up and increasing the scope of that and the breadth of that as we met our members where they were at. Feedback was great. We had just enormous response and attendance at events. In fact, the first couple events we were doing, we were like, oh man, I hope someone shows up to this thing. And I mean, they blew the doors off at him. It's Brad, what did we have for that first one? It was like 1,500. I shouldn't have said that out loud, but it was way north of what we got in person. It was incredible. The response, people were just, they missed being able to get that content and see each other, if not, physically, at least virtually. So that was huge. But, the lion's share of the work over the past year, Brad alluded to our volunteer base, and really they're the heart and soul. Our VMUG leaders are the heart and soul of the organization. And, through their efforts and through just some creativity and knowing their communities and engaging with them, we were able to have over 700 local meetings last year, which is an all-time record. We've never come close to that number before. So that was huge that we were able to continue doing that. And, I think one of the coolest things about those is that they had a very local flavor. When people couldn't get together, they were still able to it still felt like, and I dropped in on a bunch of these, right? I dropped in on ones for Buffalo, and I dropped in on ones for outside of the Northeast. I'm in the Boston area, but outside of that. And it felt like, there was that local community feeling as opposed to it being sort of a national event, which was really, really cool. So our hats are off and our gratitude to all of those volunteer members, which has been exciting. And you mentioned Advantage. Advantage has had record member growth. And I think, that's a natural outcropping of the value that it provides and getting access to those license keys through eval experience and the discounts that we're able to offer through some of the great VMware training offerings. But it's also, I think people had more time on their hands to use some of that stuff, right? We were at home more. I know a lot of people that were like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to build a home lab for the first time. And it was like, it's 2020, just getting around to building that home lab, huh? Right. So, it was cool to see people exploring. And I think, just sort of in my network, people that I talked to, they were exploring new things, right? Like maybe they were, ESX, vSphere, vSAN people. And they're like, I don't get a chance to play with NSX in the office because that's like a big thing to install. And my company maybe hasn't made that investment yet, but I can start working with it in a home lab environment and building those skills. And in fact, I know at least one person in particular that had a job role change, and now they're, primarily doing networking as a result of, kind of what they built. I say what they built, partially what they built in their home lab, which is really exciting.
So, Brad, one of the things that I noticed or I question is when a lot of the activity and a lot of the sponsorship for the org itself came from some of the events that we run in all the different places, right? The big events, I forget what you call them, but you're running that and you're having partners and ecosystem participants engage. How did that have to change during COVID times in order to, keep, kind of the partner ecosystem engaged with our community members as well?
Well, as you know, VMUG is for end users, they're for VMware employees, and they're also for partners, and they play a big part of the whole vCommunity in general. And when we pivoted to virtual events, we reached out to these partners and said, look, we are going to continue with the user cons, which is what we call our larger conferences. Right. And we still want you to be a part of it. And this is the way it's going to look. And this is what you're going to get out of this. And most of them were like, yeah, okay, let's give this a shot. And keep in mind, especially when this started, what other option was there? It was like, okay, well, we've actually done this before with you because, as Steve mentioned, this was already a mature platform. We were just growing it and adding to it as opposed to creating it. Right. And so they were very supportive, which was a big benefit to VMUG. We do appreciate the sponsor support because, like I said, they're part of the community. So we just kind of adjusted. We did give them some tips and tricks on, hey, here's how you need to interact in a virtual world. A lot of them already knew that kind of stuff. But we wanted to help them out so they could be successful and continue to be a part of the vCommunity.
Now, Steve mentioned the number of interactions he got to have with VMUG, meetings that you wouldn't probably have had. Did you also see at the leadership level opportunity to engage with board members or other things? How did that impact the way your job role was? And then Steve will drill down a little bit more about what you did with VMUG's directly. I know Pat Gelsinger came in and said, oh my God, I'm 10 times more productive because I can just meet people. And if I had used to tell people that I'm going to meet you online, they would like shun me. But now everybody's like, this is what you get. And so it allowed Pat to scale well beyond what he would have ever done in previous years.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think some of the lessons were you definitely could meet with a lot more people and have those, video face-to-face connections, I'll say. But I do think some of the challenges was just on the communication side, making sure everybody felt in the loop, making sure everybody understood and when I say everybody, like management understood where the team was. Were they in a situation where their home was like they didn't leave it and they didn't have family members and maybe they live alone? And, we've all seen the cats come across the keyboards and the kids come in, which is great to be able to kind of, get to know members a little bit more intimate than maybe we would in the past. But I do think that there were some challenges there from a communication perspective, but we learned a lot through that, and we learned how to be as productive as we can. And on the board side, I'll let Steve talk about this. He made sure that we kept the social aspect of the board, because I do think that it is important that you have those relationships from a personal relationship, even when you're doing business. And Steve was instrumental in driving some of the board communications and just the board social activities that we continue to do in a virtual world. Steve, anything you want to add to that? I know you were instrumental in that.
Well, thanks. I think one of the things that's important about, my chief job as president is to, chair the board of directors, if you will, right? That's my role. And, one of the things that I think we realized very quickly, and Brad is being very kind to sort of throw all of the light on my way, but this was absolutely a partnership between he and the staff team and I, which was, how do we keep people that have volunteered at sort of the most aggressive level within the VMUG organization? How do we get them to feel connected and be able to feel like they're getting value out of their volunteer time, as well as contribute what they had sort of planned on contributing? A term on the board of directors is 2 years long, right? And we kind of knew pretty early that this was not going to be like a 2-week moratorium on things. We were going to be, kind of down for a while here in terms of physical travel. So we were like, okay, how do we reach out? How do we do that? And I feel like that made a huge difference. I feel like our board meetings have been incredibly productive. We've had some really interesting ideas that have come up. It's been in a lot of ways, sort of like you said, with like the sort of the Pat Gelsinger thing, like, boy, I'm more productive. I don't know that we were more productive, but we were certainly able to vet out, validate, and roundtable ideas a lot more quickly than we were able to before. We were like, oh, well, we got to wait for the next time we get together and, pick your city. We can do this kind of asynchronously or in real time virtually, which was a huge benefit. But that was not different than, some of the stuff that we were doing for our members. We did new stuff for our members over that time. Things like Odyssey in partnership with the Hands-On Lab Odyssey team. We did those in October and March, hugely successful for the members that wanted to participate in that. We did Peers and Pints, which was just, I think, Matt, you've been on a couple of those, just like a social roundtable for people to get together and talk shop. The hallway track, if you will, at an event, we were able to sort of take that and do it as an event. So all those things, that connection is really important to VMUG. I feel like we did a pretty good job.
Nice. Hey, before we move on, Richard Kenyon says, hey, Brad, how's it going? I don't know if you see that in the chat, but he's on the YouTube live. So he wanted to say hi. I don't think you guys can chat back to him in the YouTube. You might be able to, but I don't think so. But I'll just call you. He sees that and he says, Matt, this is your fault why he's here, because he saw your tweet. So there you go. Shout out to Richard.
Great VMUG leader from the Buffalo area, Richard Kenyon.
Very nice. Okay, so Matt, what do you think we should ask him next?
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm just trying to think back from what doesn't seem that far long ago, which was Leader Summit out in Palo Alto for 2020, and we just barely got Leader Summit in, and then everything went downhill just because of where the pandemic took off.
Yep.
And then we had the a little bit of let's call it the retraction from in-person events as far as all things that with local chapters, right? So we're well past the year mark, right? With where we have been at with local events, and we've made this great transition over to this virtual format and new initiatives, and I think in some ways even expanding the footprint, right? Where the persons that wouldn't necessarily be able to travel to a local event or be interested in a topic that isn't necessarily prevalent in their community. Steve, you had brought up NSX before, and depending on where you're at and where your user base is there, you may or may not be focused on security or an NSX, but perhaps another community is. And with these virtual formats, we can jump in and out of these meetings. And I've grabbed ones over in the UK and over an APJ to sit in. And I think it's one of the great benefits. So my question is, or where I'm going with this is, I think that although we've done such a tremendous job of transitioning over to the virtual format, perhaps the hardest transition is now going to be back to where we were. And I think that both of you would agree where we were isn't necessarily going to be where we will end up. It will be some type of a hybrid approach, as we often say in this industry. And I want to see what your thoughts are there and how we're going to incorporate, this virtual presence with back to in-person events and user cons and vSphere days and on all those things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot sort of wrapped up in that, and I think we're thinking the same thing, right? Because it's not about whatever, we've hit the all clear mark and hey, everything's back the way it was. I don't even think that's necessarily desirable, right? To your point, I think there's something cool about being able to say, oh, hey, at my local UserCon, I wasn't able to get a session on, I'm just going to pick something from my sort of back pocket, app volumes, right? Like I didn't get a session on that because it's just not, there isn't demand in my area for that, but it's really interesting to me because it's where I spend a lot of my day. But hey, they are having it in, pick a random place, Dallas, right? I would like to be able to see that session. And so to that end, what we are excited about, and I guess I'll lead up to it briefly by just saying, we are winding down our virtual only strategy, right? And that is, we've got some great events coming up. I don't want to downplay those. We've got our June 10th virtual event, and that's going to be awesome. We've got, you may have heard of this individual before, but we've got some gentleman named Raghu is going to be speaking at that event. The name's ringing a bell for some. This week specifically seems relevant and important to that. Sure. But so we've got some real firepower from VMware showing up. We're excited about. We've got a Bridging the Gap event on June 16th, and then of course we've got some UserCons we're wrapping up with. But when we get into September, and we get back to live events, they're going to be hybrid events, right? And the first one's going to be Dallas. And that is what's really cool about this one is, we're going to have the primary UserCon in Dallas. And then, Brad, it's Austin. And where's the second? Houston. Okay, that's what I thought. I didn't want to say it if I was wrong. But then we're going to have satellite viewing areas in Austin and Houston, and then, of course, online. So we're trying to be able to meet people where they're at. Maybe you want to be able to get together with some people in your local area, in the Austin or Houston area, but don't want to make the trip out to Dallas. Cool. We're going to meet you where you're at, and you can get together and experience the event collectively and collaboratively together, but as a hybrid event. Or you're in Boston, but you want to see some of the content that we've got on that online track, you can do that. And so I think that's where the opportunity is, Matt, is how do we strike that balance between being able to democratize access to this, to wherever you're at and whatever you want to get, and also meet people's very legitimate need to get together. And I know, you and I have seen each other at more than one VMUG before, and my favorite parts of those user cons is, when we're hanging out and you've got the circle of people standing out in the hallway talking about what's going on in the office and in your careers, and then someone else comes in and they're like, oh, I never experienced that before. And that's what gets me going. So it's, where's the balance between that and just sort of giving the content out there? And I feel like we're going to get there, but certainly we're going to be experimenting with some hybrid stuff over the first couple events.
I actually think that the VMUG model of meeting people is going to actually take off. I think you're going to have a strong year. And the reason is I think there's going to be a transition. I've been telling other people this, which is I'm going to keep Zooming, right? This is what I'm going to do with my life, right? I'm not going to go back, right? Even if I go back to Palo Alto, a third of the office or half the office is going to be there. So we call it hybrid, but it's going to be keep Zooming, right? But what I'd like to see Zoom offer is, hey, I want to meet people in a coffee shop. Like people on this meeting, let's schedule a coffee together, right? And it should just be a kind of a Zoom click that you can take the 20 people there and say, hey, let's go meet. And I can see where we're going to keep doing these online events, right? This online things are going to be here for the rest of my life, but it's going to also open up this need to be able to go, oh, but I also want to see some of these people once a month or once every other month, right? So how do I go have a coffee? Wow, VMUG, right? I really should join VMUG, so that when I'm having all these online streaming events and these podcasts and other things, I can go pick through a list of, physical events, physical places, and go, I think I'll go join that one. I'm going to go visit. I'm going to go to my local place and have a coffee with them, or I'm going to go to a VMUG meeting in the evening, and because I'm going to mix some of that in. My day job is going to be, a million Zooms every day, right? It's not going to go away, but then I want to also have that connection with people. And before it was like, well, I go to a VMUG meeting when there was some reason I wanted to go, right? There was a session, or I was invited, or it was just going to be one in my area. I always go to the one in San Jose, right? But now I think it's going to be a function of my job to say, hey, I've had 80 Zoom meetings, so I want to have a ratio, right? 2 real meetings to, once a month, 2 real, something like that. And I think VMUG's in a perfect position to allow to have that hybrid environment, but then also spin up this ability to suck me into going somewhere and meeting some real people once, on a cadence, right? So I like that idea.
I couldn't agree. I'll throw it to Brad in a second, but I couldn't agree more, because I think of how many people we all know, just our collective networks, how many people are in a job because they knew somebody and made a connection at that organization because they met them at an event, right? I don't know if you've tried to do networking with people you haven't met before virtually, but that is a challenge. And I think we acknowledge that. And so there is a very human need to connect in person and meet each other. It is a lot less intimidating, at least for me it is. I don't think I'm that strange, but it is less intimidating to meet somebody in person for the first time than it is to be on a Zoom together for the first time. And ask anybody who's interviewed for a job over Zoom, it is far more nerve-wracking from, everything that I've been able to see, far more nerve-wracking than doing it in person. I just think that speaks to who we are as a people. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. We're envisioning VMUGs as a place where people come together. More importantly, even than necessarily some of the content, because a lot of that content, we can package up and stream to you over Zoom.
Streamed, yeah.
Right. So, Brad, I don't know, Brad, what are your thoughts around that?
I agree. I think the interesting thing is, Eric, you mentioned that Zoom is here to stay. I agree with that. And like my podcast consumption has gone up tremendously during this. And I don't think that'll go away. There'll be times when I'm traveling or mowing the lawn or Saturday morning where I'm not going to go meet with people, but I'll listen to the podcast. The flip side is exactly what you said, Eric. There's going to be times where we're going to need to be together. And I think it was on a previous podcast of yours, Eric, where you talked about your role being, hey, I'm going to be in virtual primary, but there's going to be times I'm going to A, need to go to the Palo Alto office, or B, need to meet up somewhere to meet with my colleagues. And whether those colleagues are your coworkers or whether those colleagues are just people that you want to bounce ideas off of, VMUG will be a great place to do that, because the hallway track is not something that is easily packaged up and put in a podcast. It just, that stuff happens naturally. The connections that you make meeting people, very difficult to do online, much more easier to do when you can just come into a conversation and say, oh, you're talking about NSX. Let me learn about this, or tell you my experiences, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason people will come is because of the people. And that is, just such a key part of VMUG.
Yeah. Matt, you're a remote worker. Are you planning on going back to Palo Alto office when things open back up? Or I have a feeling you're in the same boat you've always been in.
I think that it's going to necessitate it, right? I mean, it's going to, in some way, we're going to be back out there and traveling in the field. I mean, there's always going to be a component of that. There's whether that's, in a customer-facing role with meeting customers in person, or back to a corporate headquarters for training updates or team building activities or whatnot. And I think that even becomes more of a key component, right, to the overall ecosystem of an org, is that, yes, we're meeting together daily sometimes in these Zoom stand-up sessions, but so often, I mean, I was just speaking with some other customers where there's been new members introduced to the team that they have yet ever to meet in person. That they just haven't had the opportunity, given where they're at with travel restrictions and team building events and whatnot, that just haven't occurred. So yeah, I think we're going to get there, right? And part of that will be these local events, and we'll be looking for those opportunities where everyone needs that central space to come together. And VMUG can serve that opportunity. But Brad, one of the items that I wanted to bring up as a topic of discussion is more, long-term roadmaps and some of the things that VMUG was working on previously. So we've always had the user cons out there and with great success. And some of the items that we were looking to make a little bit of a change there with was, that for certain markets, pivoting over from, full-blown user cons to more quarterly vSphere days. And, where's the board sitting on that? I'll throw this out to Steve as well. Is that something that's still on track? Has the pandemic potentially changed that? And where do you see that user con versus vSphere, quarterly vSphere day, initiative, or what was an initiative, now play out as we roll into the latter half of 21?
Well, one thing that we know is going on and has been going on for a while is just the expansion of VMware. And, back in the day it was server virtualization, and now it's everything else. So it is hard to do a one-day event that has everything that people could possibly need. And so some of the ideas is, you mentioned vSphere Day, how do we get these product-specific days that we can say, hey, this is something specific about NSX, about vSphere, about VCF, about, EUC, whatever the case is. In fact, that Bridging the Gap event on June 16th is one that's specific about networking and security. So we are starting to branch out into those. VMware's been a great partner. vSphere Days is something that we had planned to launch and working with VMware, and then COVID came, so that all got sidetracked. And so we are still have that, something that we're eyeing to get back in person. Obviously, vSphere would need to be a part of that, and not vSphere, but VMware. So we need to make sure that whatever restrictions that VMware has are lifted. But that is something that we are looking at. And Steve, I know you're big on the idea of product-specific days, and I think that is a direction that we have to continue to go down, because we just can't be everything to everybody in a day.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And this is Brad's right. Like if anybody on the board were here right now, they'd be like, oh, here goes Steve rotating into this again, right? This is something I feel really passionate about, because Matt, I'll just use you an example, because you and I have known each other for a long time. When we got started in this, VMUG was effectively the vSphere users group, because that's what VMware was. That was their product line. That was the whole thing, right? And so everybody was really aligned on that. And you could do a one-day show that got really deep, and we could have deep dives and things, but it was all interesting to everybody. The challenge wasn't which session is relevant to me. The challenge was, which session am I going to have to miss for one that I want to see more? That was the question. Now we're into a space where, a VMware customer, right, could be somebody doing Workspace ONE and managing a bunch of mobile devices, all the way up to somebody using Avi, global load balancing. I mean, there's just and those when you talk about a VMware user, those users are by and large, any customer I'm aware of, not the same individual, right? The person running Avi and the person running Workspace ONE is not, a Jane sitting in the cube. It's not the same person, right?
The breadth and depth of the products now is you can see within the same org,
yeah,
multiple business units that maybe have limited interaction with one another, that are fully involved with one stack, for whether it be network security or Kubernetes or whatnot, right? That the product within our portfolio is really incredible.
Yeah,
and it's not easy to package up into a single day.
Right, which has been from a user, from a technologist standpoint, has been a ton of fun to watch. Right, that has been hugely fun to be a part of that. And look, hopefully we get a chance later to talk about some of the things that being a VMUG member has done for my career. But it's big, right? It's a huge portion of what I've been able to do with my time. But I'll tell you, what we are sort of envisioning the UserCon to be is the place for like the core of where VMware is going: vision, direction, strategy, and connection. The people-to-people connection is that UserCon piece, and that's what we build around. And so are we always going to have content there that is relevant to a plurality, if not a majority of people there? Absolutely. But those product-specific ones where we can go really deep or spend some time unpacking something and exploring Tanzu, specifically, or I like talking about the obvious stuff because actually we have it and we're deploying it right now, so we're excited about that. But that's, I think those things are a huge opportunity. And when you talk about hybrid, right, when you have a product specific thing, like we did one EUC day that was a virtual event, blew the doors off of attendance. It was hugely popular. But if we'd have done that in one location, we wouldn't have had nearly that sort of success. But people that are interested in EUC are going to attend that regardless of where they are because they want the content. And it's going to be the same thing for NSX or the same thing for Tanzu or the same thing for Avi or anything like that. So yeah, I think you're on it, and it's going to be. I feel strongly this is about finding that mix that our members get the most value out of. Because at the end of the day, VMUG's only purpose is to serve the needs of our members and our community. And so the more we hear that I want content on X, the more we're going to be able to deliver that.
Yeah, you notice in chat, Robert mentions one of the things we're experiencing in the Netherlands are the so-called tech cons as an addition to the main VMUG event to dig deeper into specific product categories. So I think that's exactly what we're talking about, especially as VMware gets bigger, right? It's one of these things you have to. Everybody wrestles with it, even on VMTN. We wrestle with the menu dropdowns. How do you fit all the technology that we actually have in a navigatable, findable form, right? And then how do you segment different users now? Because they're there. You got IT admins, you got storage admins, you have cloud departments, and the cloud departments don't talk to the vSphere parts sometimes. So it's a very interesting thing. And there's a couple topics that are interesting for me. So I have one aside topic that I'll mention from a value prop. I think that VMUG also is in the perk business, right? Like I actually see that, when you're doing IT, you sit in a data center, you're listening to humming fans, whatever, or you're in your office and you're just sitting, watching screens and SSHing into boxes and doing that. And like every month or so, I want like a perk. I want to be able to get out of the office, have a beer, do something. And I have to have a legitimate reason to tell my boss that I get to go out and do something, buy a lunch, whatever, right? And so to some degree, VMUG enables and I felt like COVID removed my perk, right? Or my, now all I do is sit and run IT machines all day, right? And so like to me, VMUG gives us an ability to travel and yes, meet each other and learn. So you have all those values, but the ability to get out and get a lunch or some food and interact in a space that isn't my data center or my cube, right, is a big deal, right? And I felt like almost like if we didn't bring it back, I was gonna quit my job, right? Like I mean my job is not rich enough, right, just to be doing this tech stuff 9 times all day, every day. That perk needed to be there. I was going to quit and go work at Starbucks or something because you need that. You need that as part of your routine. Right?
You hit the nail on the head. Ooh, I have an echo all of a sudden. I'm just going to drop this for a second. You hit the nail on the head for me, which is, and I've said this to my boss before. We've had some candid conversations. Like, he's like, "Man, you came back from I was speaking somewhere. It doesn't matter. I was given a session at a VMUG, and he's like, "Oh, you came back and you were, you really jazzed up about it, really excited." I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "That's where I get my energy from." Like, let's be honest. The IT grind. I feel like I could say this in this forum. The IT grind can be a grind. Like, it can wear you down. And how many bloggers have written their post on burnout? I've written one, right? I mean, I almost every blogger I know has written the like, "Oh yeah, I got really burned out" post. And for me, that was the start of the pandemic. And it coincided, Eric, with exactly what you said. I was in my bedroom because I don't have a home office. I'm not that cool. So I was in my bedroom for like 22 hours a day between sleeping and exercising and working. And just like I never left. And the wheels came off very quickly. So I'm with you 100%. That is what we want to be. Well, no, we don't want to be burnout. We want to be a place where people can go to connect 100%.
Yeah, the energy of that, right, you're right. It also gets you excited, right? And I'll throw the Raghu. I'm excited that Raghu is going to come and do something with VMUG, right? Because I listened to Raghu talk yesterday, right? He did a cute little thing, internally. I don't think it went external, but it was just like, you get to meet and he's a really tech guy, right? So like you get to meet famous tech guy that have good thinking, and then they're talking to you and you're like, it's a shot in the arm, right? I actually sent a mail because I used to work for him. He hired me at VMware way back. I would say that like meeting these type of people at a VMUG where they do have passion, and maybe you're feeling a little bit down, and you go and then you meet these people and you go, wow, people are really excited. I really am lucky that I'm part of this. Right. And then you go back and you're excited. Right. And it does bring energy to, even a meeting a guy like Brad, right? Like, I mean, even him, like you can walk away and feel like, wow, there's a guy that has been in this and he's still there. And I like that. I like meeting the longtime guys because they really do care, right? Like, because they could have gotten other jobs. They could have left us a long time ago, but they don't. And they bring the Ragu type passion and excitement to the whole ecosystem. And you get that by going to one of these events, right? And you meet the people that really do care. Yeah.
And we see that passion, right, in a lot of these leadership and the leader initiatives that we've seen. And I'm sure Brad, Steve can comment on this of how innovative and quick to adapt a lot of these leaders were, and some of the things that we had seen as far as the amount of new content that's out there in different content formats. I know we have groups now that are doing their own podcasts, doing their own vlogs. Really, the meeting cadence, we said 700 to 800 meetings within the last year. I think that was a tremendous increase. So not only are we having a higher number of attendance, but more meetings overall. And I'll throw this back out to both of you. What are some of the more innovative ideas and what have you seen out there as far as pivots from local groups and what have they been able to take advantage of and what do you see them incorporating now going forward?
Ooh. I'll take that first. So one of the things that we're going to do in this hybrid event, it's a platform. I don't mind saying the platform is called Swap Card, but it's designed for a hybrid environment. So we don't want it to be, hey, we're going to go to this UserCon and just Zoom the keynote, right? That's not going to be fun for the people that are attending remotely. So it's that interaction and way people can really feel like they're there if they're not literally there, but still feel that way. The other thing, and I know it's kind of small, it's just the polling. People have started using polling more. There's a lot of interactive polling things to get people to get just more involved in it. And I can't remember the name. There's a couple of them out there that we've used in that whiteboarding kind of software where everybody can interact with it. Miro is one that we've used in the past. And, that's a great way to get people just, interactive in there. Not everybody wants to go on camera, which I'm like, we're X months into this pandemic. If you don't have your camera on, it's not that big a deal. But we still want you to be active, even if it's just in the chat. The amount of chats that go on in Zooms is great. It's a great way to get people involved. So that's just some of the things that I've seen that have helped out. VMUG or just in normal work life.
Yeah. Innovation is a funny thing, and we talk about that sort of a lot. Like, I don't know how innovative it is, but one of the things that I've seen that I've truly appreciated is the sort of, VMUGs traditionally have been structured around a sort of one-to-many content delivery. Like you have somebody up speaking, and there's questions and there's some crosstalk. But when things were virtual, I would jump into a local meeting in pick a city, random city X, and it was much more many to many. It was a roundtable conversation versus a presentation. And I think that a user group is at its best when we're all sharing what's happening and we're all leveling up and all growing together. Like that's where the magic happens, right? And I say that from like way back in the day when I was quite a bit younger, had more hair. I would attend user groups, and that's what it was. There was no formal presentation. There was just like, hey, I was able to suck the you remember the old encyclopedia, the Britannicas on the CD, like, I was able to suck that onto my hard drive and now I can access. Nobody cared. It was a pointless technology, but we were playing and we were learning things. And I think that has been really cool watching people do that. And I've even seen some groups do hands-on labs together. So they'll get together in a Zoom and then on their other screen, because let's face it, everybody has more than one monitor these days. They'd have the lab on there and they'd be doing it together. Like, oh, I'm stuck here. And they'd be sharing information and helping each other out, and the entire group would level up their skills over the span of that session. Like that's the sweet spot. Like that's where we want to be as a community, that we're, leading each other.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, there's so much to gain from that, right? That there's something to be said from the knowledge that we've gone through this and we've pivoted to these, more collaborative type sessions. And it's back to Steve's point of, I can remember going to Cisco users groups back in the late 90s, where it was share what you know, or what are you working on this week? No structured format. Just what did you run into? We used to have a session called Bang Your Head, which was what are you stuck on this week? What's that support ticket? Where it's more of that collaboration and figuring out who's the local SME on our particular subject, or what have they ran into, or are they the ones that just went through the Horizon upgrade and whatnot, rather than, and then there's a place for it where there's these presentations and whatnot. But I think we've maybe over-adjusted to a little bit too much of the presentation side and a little less of that collaboration. And now that's coming back. And really to see where we're seeing these interactive sessions. And Steve, you had mentioned that those guided hands-on labs together. What a great initiative, right? What a great thing of let's go all and try to work through this particular module together. And we're going to help one another out as we go through and might get stuck on something. And that's a way to self-correct and bring back the value to these groups. And it's something great to see.
And I noticed Richard's comment about you can head to different VMUGs without going across the country in the virtual aspects. One of the things that was different about virtual, we realized early on, is you can have that building content, because you can do a 100 level in this city, and then the next city do a 200, and then a 300, and then maybe repeat it because no one's traveling there. So it's not, we heard that from VMware and our sponsors. It's like user cons are great, but when they're in person, I have to do 100 level every time. And so that's something that we realized, okay, we need to address that. We want to have 200, 300 level, whether it's in person or virtual. So this hybrid aspect of it is one of the ways that we can achieve that.
Sure,
Yeah.
you absolutely have to have that content there, right? I mean, it depends on the nature of the user base, and to be able to make that adjustment for the given groups that want to go down that to that 300 or 400 level where they really want to dive into the particular content, and to have that availability. Sure.
I want to have the 300 or 400 because that's my level now, in like Bali or possibly Hawaii or somewhere really, so that
We'll send you that link.
Brad, how many times have I said, are we going to have a user con in Honolulu this year? How many times? We've got to be in triple digits at this point.
As we come up to the top of the hour, I want to ask you a little bit about cloud and what your perceptions are. And you don't really have to have any answers. It's just like probing what people are thinking, and you can think in real time too. So to some degree, we are changing VMware to a SaaS service. We talk about pivoting a lot, and Raghu talks about getting to SaaS services quicker. And you start looking at cloud and software as solutions. Then that's happening in the industry. Have you guys thought about what that means from a user community perspective? Because I look at it online, and I look at less people doing installs, more people clicking and mouse. It's almost like no one's actually installing and configuring anymore. Now they're using SaaS services, and you get into the usage paradigms, and maybe there's not that much difference. But I'm wondering if you guys have considered what is, as we transition to more and more click and buy kind of solutions, what does that mean from a community perspective? Because I wrestle with this to some degree a lot as well, right? Which is, how many people are going to be super geeky? Like my favorite, thing that we did one of the things is somebody made a storage system out of USB chips, right? Like we had a terabyte system and we ran vSAN on it. It lasted 3 minutes before the whole thing melted. But it's very geeky. But as we transition to SaaS services, that kind of stuff probably isn't going to be happening, or the next generation of IT people are going to be focused on SaaS delivery and SaaS things. Now, I think there'll always be data centers. There's always going to be hybrid, right? But what does it mean for you guys? Do you guys see any of that impact, or have you thought much about that? And you can say no. Then I say, well, if you haven't, what do you think about it?
Wow. Yes, I would say a large portion of the time the board has spent together over the past several years has been talking about how do we serve a membership base well when this is where the industry is going, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the stuff that we think about is how do we help our members get there? How do we help lead them on that? And so we've had a bunch of different challenges that we've done. We've tried to point. I say we try to point people. It's a little bit more hopefully heavy-handed than that. We're encouraging people to check out things like Kube Academy and things like that. And we are intentional about putting content out there that we know for some folks is going to be not a head scratcher, but new to them, right? Like, we were pretty quick to be putting more NSX content out there because we saw that, hey, this is an important thing. And same thing with as we talk about cloud and vRealize management and stuff like that that's out there. So I think that's the first step. The first step is how do we guide a group of members or a group of users that are using technology A when it's very clear that we're moving to technology B as an industry? How do we get them ready and prepared to be in technology B? So that's one thing that we talk a lot about. And then the second thing is, what is the relevance? I mean, this is sort of like close to the chest stuff, but like, what is the relevance of VMUG in a completely cloud-based SaaS model is I think the question that you're asking. And I think there's a ton of relevance there because are you going to get really geeky and talk about like how you're, doing, let me show my age here a little bit, but doing, LUN allocation across no, you're not going to be talking about that. But I think you are going to be talking about how to best consume it. And I think one of, some of the best examples I have of that is if you follow some of the folks like a Corey Quinn or some of these people out on Twitter, like you can get pretty technical on a lot of these cloud SaaS-based services. And so I think it's just a different type, the same way that I've got a bunch of systems engineers that work on my team. And when I start talking about setting IRQs and dip switches, they're like, dude, what are you talking about? But they're not less technical than me. They just came in at a different level. And I think that's going to continue to happen is that people are going to be like, you're really worried about path selection policies? Like that was the thing you gave a crap about? And I'm like, yeah, we really cared about that back in the day. And they're not going to care about that, but there's going to be something else they're going to hear about. How are they more intelligently consuming the resources? How are they being efficient with their allocation? How are they writing the code and automating it so that it runs itself? I think it's just a different level, and there's going to be users for that, and VMUG is going to be there to support them and connect them so that they can share the best practices that we haven't even stubbed our toes on yet in the future.
And I would add to that, and we see this from our members' surveys about they're interested in professional development. And part of that is the soft skills side of things. Our audience as IT over the past couple of decades has definitely changed. Steve, you mentioned the IRQ and those kind of things. That was conversations you had with other geeks. Now, when you're sitting there and you're talking about cloud and how this can help my company get things to market quicker, you need to know how to talk to the marketing people. You need to know how to talk to the C-level people. You need to talk to the business unit head who has nothing to do with IT. I remember an old IBM commercial from a long time ago when they're like, yeah, the security's in the blinky lights. And it's like, that's the kind of people that we need to be able to communicate effectively with and make sure that we can get our ideas across in a way that they can understand and also a way that can get funded. So a lot of that is going to be leveling up not only the IT skills that we have, but how to communicate that to the appropriate people and knowing your audience. Knowing your audience is key.
Yeah, up-leveling that conversation and the skill that you need to learn, and then users will actually have to talk about that. How do I explain cloud usage to my executive team, right? And the value prop of being nimble and fast, right? And how do I? And so the conversations might, and the users might actually change a little bit, right? That makes sense. Yeah.
And I think that's a story arc that a lot of VMUG members have been able to do, over the years, right? And I know I count myself as one of them. I'm like the poster child for somebody whose career was advanced through VMUG. First learning the technology, then getting opportunity to present and polish my presentation skills about that, and then volunteering to run the thing and understanding, project management and getting, coordinating groups together, and then thinking about strategy on the board. And so like I've been able to watch I volunteered my time with VMUG and I got direct, benefit in the office. And that's, I'm one of many, right? I am not the only person that has had that journey.
All right, Matt, we're coming to the end of the top of the hour. We're going to have to wrap up. I'll give you the last question.
So Steve, to that end, we had talked about VMUG Advantage, right? And what a great utility and tool for users to go out there and get exposed to, the product range, right? With these NFR licenses that they can use to deploy in a home lab. But as we make this switch over to more SaaS services, right, there's not that equivalent of those license keys. And Eric, and this might be an open-ended question. I know that Eric and I have talked about it on several episodes with different BUs that we've had on that offer primarily their product as SaaS. And it's how do we get a longer runway for these products where the user may not already have access to it, where they're just trying to learn it, and they need longer than that 30-day runway or 15-day runway, depending on what the the base trial is, if there's one even out there. And what is the board doing, and how is VMUG approaching that to continue that great tradition of VMUG Advantage, but now for these SaaS services that can't be delivered with that the old traditional license key?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, and it's one that we've spent quite a bit of time talking about. I'll tell you, I don't have anything to announce right now, so I'm don't ask me to say we're doing blank, right? But I'll tell you, we have such a strong partnership with VMware, and we have such great advocates within VMware for us that I am convinced that the conversations that we're having are going to yield some really cool stuff for our members. And I think you're going to be able to see some of that reasonably soon. And I am somewhat buoyed by the fact that, do you know who was really, really instrumental in helping get VMUG Advantage and eval experience off the ground? Anyone?
Raghu.
Yeah. Yeah,
Raghu.
it was Raghu. Yeah, right.
Around chanting it all week ever since they announced it. I've just been like,
yeah, right. So
best guy ever for community to be put in as CEO. Even a little bit better. Than that.
Yeah,
that was great. But like Raghu is like the man. He is the man. He gets it. Totally gets it.
So 100%, you just took everything I was going to say and distilled it into an awesome chant. I mean, that's it, right? Like we have the CEO is somebody who has helped us immeasurably in the past, and we have a great relationship with, and sees the value of community and sees the value of what we're doing at VMUG. And so I know we're going to come up with some great answers to that. I don't have them right now. And I'd be lying to you if I said like, oh yeah, totally, we're just going to give people, whatever X dollars or anything. But I don't have that yet, but I know we're going to get it because I have such incredible confidence in the relationship that VMUG and VMware share. And I know we both want what's best for our members and your customers.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, we're at the top of the hour. We're going to skip the V Barbecue report because we're already running late. Guys, thanks a lot for being here and jumping on, and always good to have you guys here. Thanks for all your great work, and we really appreciate it. Everybody go join VMUG, and certainly think about paying that $100 to get a VMUG Advantage. You won't regret it, especially as we get VMworld going again. It's a great way, and if you haven't built a lab, lots of people there. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having us.